this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Wasabi is purpose-built to free your business from skyrocketing storage costs and fees. Wasabi is the go-to provider for professional and collegiate sports teams around the world. Check out Wasabi's AI-enabled intelligent media storage, Wasabi Air, to the industry's only cloud storage service with triple protection against cyber criminals. Wasabi, driving innovation in data storage for up to 80% less than market competition. Try for free at wasabi.com. Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage, proud partner of iHeart Podcast Network. This message is brought to you by Apple Card. Apple Card members can earn unlimited daily cash back on everyday purchases wherever they shop. This means you could be earning daily cash on just about anything, like a slice of pizza from your local pizza place or a latte from the corner coffee shop. Apply for Apple Card in the Wallet app to see your credit limit offer in minutes. Subject to credit approval. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Terms and more at applecard.com.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 1089 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, thanks for tuning in. We're in the thick of it with the NFL Draft. We're talking prospects, and we're doing so from both a dynasty angle and a season-long angle. With best ball especially, redraft is becoming more and more of a year-round game. Dynasty has always been that way, but it's becoming more evident in the season-long game types too. So since we're talking rookies in Dynasty, let's talk about rookies in redraft as well. You might recall, but last summer, I did an episode on the rookie edge in redraft leagues. It was actually episode 1000 of the Late Round Podcast. There was a lot of chatter about rookies no longer being good redraft bets because the market now rightfully understands that rookies can be valuable in redraft. So I dug into the topic. What I generally found was that rookie wide receivers, they were good bets across the board. We were also coming off a season where those rookie wide receivers dominated. So that wasn't much of a surprise finding. And for the record, it's something I've written about in the Late Round Draft Guide each year. For running backs, they were still okay enough picks, but it did appear as though the market was drafting them earlier than usual. And when that's the case, expectations change. They weren't players you needed to avoid, but they weren't players you needed to aggressively target either. Now, thanks to this past season, it seems like people have been mega turned off by the idea of rookies in redraft. That's a big reason why I wanted to revisit this topic. Because the results last year were not fantastic. At wide receiver, you had Tedero McMillan, Travis Hunter, Emeka Ibuka, and Matthew Golden with relatively high ADPs. Only Ibuka was able to outperform his ADP expectation. More on all that in a second. At running back, you had Ashton Genty, Amarian Hampton, Travion Henderson, RJ Harvey, Caleb Johnson, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Cam Skadabu, Quinshot Judkins. They all had top 45 ranks at the position. The vast majority of them within what was considered an elite draft class, most of them failed to live up to the hype. And all year, all we heard was, this is why you don't draft rookies high in redraft. But should we really abide by that rule? Was last year just a blip? Today's episode is all about answering those questions. Now, before getting into things, I just want to send a quick reminder to check out the Late Round Prospect Guide. You get info on all the ZAP models, player write-ups, rankings, bad dad jokes, and more, all for $19.99. It's over 170 pages of content. Learn more over on lateround.com. So the real question we're asking here is there value in drafting rookies in redraft leagues? The conclusions from last summer said that generally, yes, there is value. More so at wide receiver than at running back, but overall, there is some value. I want to expand on those results a little bit today because I think what was described on that episode was more tip of the iceberg than anything else. Being of value comes down to a cost-benefit analysis. If a rookie's drafted late and he plays just okay, he might still be a value because he was drafted late. But one drafted early with that same production, he's not a value. That cost side of the equation is just average draft position for fantasy football purposes. And overall, it does appear that we're drafting both rookie running backs and wide receivers earlier than we used to. This is a little bit easier to explain at wide receiver, so let's start there. My average draft position data, it's sourced from fantasy data, goes back to 2014. Since 2014, we've had just one top 12 wide receiver by ADP. And I'm looking only at positional ADP here, since overall ADP, it can shift more depending on the source and depending on the type of league that we're looking at. But that one top 12 wide receiver was Marvin Harrison Jr. Since 2014, we've had 4 top 24 wide receivers by ADP. 3 of those 4 have come over the last 2 seasons. We've had 10 top 36 wide receivers by ADP. 4 of those 10 have come over the last 2 seasons. I mean, just from that, you get the picture. We've been drafting wide receivers earlier over the last couple of years. Even top 42 wideouts. We've had 24 rookies drafted in the top 42 wide receivers since 2014. 9 of them have come over the last 2 seasons. Now, it could be that the last 2 draft classes have just been really good. And while they haven't been bad, the ZAP model doesn't really see them as substantially better than some other seasons. Like if you look at the top 2 categories in the ZAP model, legendary performers and elite producers, we've had 5 of them and 4 of them over the last 2 years. In the 10 years prior, we had 4.1 per season. So we're right at that average. The high end, the higher parts of the position have been mostly the same from a ZAP model perspective. And that's not the end all, but it's at least telling us that it's not like these last couple of classes have been unbelievably great. Now at running back, it's always kind of been common for rookie running backs to have better draft capital, to have better ADPs. Like we've had 8 of them drafted as RB1s within this data set, top 12 running backs. One of those was last year with Ashton Genty. We've had 22 of them drafted in the top 24. 4 of those have come over the last 2 years. All 4 of them happening last season. What's kind of interesting is that last year tied for the most top 36 rookie running backs that we've seen since 2014. And it tied for the most top 42 rookie running backs too. And you might be saying, well, yeah, it was a good draft class. And yes, it was. But you could very easily argue that drafters were pushing rookie running backs up the draft board a little bit too much when you compare ZAP model scores to ADP. For instance, when looking at the top 3 ZAP score categories, which are legendary performer, elite producer, and weekly starter, we had 5 of those in last year's class, yet we had 7 top 36 running backs by ADP. That type of proportion is not normal. When we had 7 top 36 running backs before, back in 2020, we had 8 running backs in one of those top 3 categories. What I'm generally getting at here is that the market is behaving a little bit differently with rookies. The last couple of years has really seen wide receivers shoot up draft boards. And when you consider the quality of running back, I'd generally say that we're drafting running backs earlier as well. And for the record, I'm not talking tight ends on today's episode just because there's not that much data to look at. And I think people are generally on the same page with rookie tight ends anyway. But look, what all this means is that in order for these players to live up to the hype, to live up to expectation, they need to be even better than they used to because their cost is higher than it used to be. So now the question becomes, are these positions performing worse against expectation? Yes and no. Let's start at wide receiver first. We really don't have a large sample of wide receivers to work off of when looking at top 30 players of the position by ADP. So we'll focus solely on top 48 wide receivers by ADP here. I alluded to this earlier, but I calculate how players perform versus ADP expectation. Essentially, if a player is drafted 50th overall, then that player has some sort of expected PPR points per game number based on what we've seen historically from other players with that draft slot. So maybe a 50th overall wide receiver is expected to score 12.5 PPR points per game. But then what if he finishes with 13.5 PPR points per game? That means he ended up exceeding that expectation by 1 full PPR point per game. This isn't the only way to evaluate how well a player performed, but it's at least an interesting way to factor in cost when doing that evaluation. Historically, if you look at top 48 wide receivers who played at least 8 games in a season, and this is positional ADP, so someone who's drafted wide receiver 46 is part of this data set. Rookie wide receivers have actually outperformed non-rookies when you look at ceiling outcomes. For instance, we're looking at top 48 wide receivers who outperform expectation by 4 or more PPR points per game. 14.3% of the rookie wideouts in that group have done that since 2014. For non-rookies, it's 13.6%. If you look at how well they exceed expectation by 2 or more PPR points per game, rookies almost 32%, non-rookies 26 to 27%. So when looking across the entirety of the season, rookie wide receivers drafted in the top 48 are generally outperforming non-rookies versus expectation at the high end. This type of analysis has been the late round draft guide every single year that I've done the guide, and it's not going to be any different this year. However, something that I haven't touched on very much in that guide is downside risk, and that's a key point that I want to talk through today. Fantasy football, from my perspective, is one with upside. Upside is everything. You want to chase ceiling outcomes and not worry that much about floor outcomes. Because as Nelly once said, 2 is not a winner and 3 nobody remembers. We just want to get first. But I think it became very evident last year that floor outcomes can matter when managing a team week to week, at least to some managers. So in the name of transparency, let's not only look at these ceiling outcomes or exceeding expectation by 2 or 4 PPR points per game. Let's look at floor outcomes too. And that's where things look different for rookie wide receivers. Among top 48 rookie wide receivers since 2014, they've underperformed versus expectation by 4 or more PPR points per game at a 17% rate. For non-rookies, that number's 13%. It's lower. You can do the exact same thing when looking at players who are underperforming by 2 or more PPR points per game. Rookie wide receivers, 34%. Non-rookies, 30%. To put that another way, rookie wide receivers over the last 12 years, they've given us a higher ceiling versus cost, but they've also given us a lower floor versus cost. And to me, this is exactly why we have these strong opinions about rookies in redraft. Because look, the average fantasy manager, they're not doing this kind of analysis. I wouldn't expect them to. They shouldn't be doing this kind of analysis. I'm a sick individual. This is not their job. They're going to go off their own experiences. Maybe someone drafted a rookie wide receiver with a single-digit round pick 3 years in a row, and there's a chance that all 3 of those rookies really busted. And that shapes that manager's opinion about rookies in general, whether fair or not. The same thing happens on the other end. We get these really high-end outcomes with rookie wide receivers. And people who landed those players in their drafts, they love it. And whether fairly or unfairly, that shapes their own perception of rookies in season-long leagues. The truth of the matter is that what we think is the most obvious answer actually is the most obvious answer. Rookies are volatile. There's a wide range of outcomes. To me, that's a good thing. That's the way that I play fantasy football. I embrace that volatility to get that league-winning player. But to some, they don't like that. They want more of a floor. That's the way they like to manage their fantasy teams. This dynamic has only been emphasized in more recent years. If you split up this ADP data and you look at 2014 through 2020 and then 2021 through last season, so 2025, you get some very clear trends. Over the last 5 years, 21% of rookie wide receivers drafted in the top 48 have underperformed versus expectation by 4 or more PPR points per game. That number is just 12.5% with the earlier grouping, or rookies drafted from 2014 through 2020. But if you look at the rookie wide receivers who outperformed expectation by 4 or more PPR points per game, from 2014 through 2020, just 6% of the wide receivers, 6% of the rookie wide receivers were able to do that. But over the last 5 years, rookie wide receivers have outperformed expectation by 4 or more PPR points per game at a 21% clip. That is insane. The ceiling outcomes have been crazy. So now we've got this recency bias at play. Take everything I just said about the individual fantasy manager and how they might view rookies. Multiply that by 100. Because we've had this really polarizing 5-year window of rookie wide receivers. The overall bottom line here, though, is that rookie wide receivers, in sum, they've had better cost-based outcomes than non-rookie wide receivers have since 2014. The problem, though, is that they've also had lower floors. Now, at running back, it's not as straightforward. I've written about this in the guide as well, but there are other career years other than rookies that are much more advantageous to draft versus cost at running back. Rookies have just usually been fine. Nothing special, just fine. And if you look at history or since 2014, across the board, you're generally going to find non-rookies outperforming rookies at running back. It's just really close usually. For example, among top 48 rookie running backs since 2014, 16% of them have exceeded ADP expectation by 4 or more PPR points per game. For non-rookies, that's 17.5%. It's not a massive difference. Both groups have exceeded 2 or more PPR points per game at the exact same rate, basically. But you guessed it, the downside risk is very evident with rookie running backs. When looking at how frequently they underperform by 4 or more PPR points per game, rookies are at a 23% rate. Non-rookies, just 14%. For underperforming by 2 or more points per game, it's 39% versus 30%. And the exact same trends exist for top 30 running backs too. We can look at top 30 running backs because our sample size is large enough to work with. It's not big enough at wide receiver to draw any meaningful conclusions. So to put all this another way, we found that rookie wide receivers, they had higher cost-based ceilings than non-rookies. But they've also had lower cost-based floors. For running backs, they've had similar season-long ceilings, but they've had lower floors. That's not the combination you want to see. However, with all of this analysis, I'm looking at season-long numbers. But fantasy football isn't just a season-long game, it's a weekly one. And it's a weekly one where the end of the season matters most, since that's when the playoffs start. And in a lot of leagues, half the teams are making the playoffs. With rookie running backs, yes, season-long wise, you're going to get a similar ceiling outcome as a veteran while getting a worse floor. And that is bad. It is objectively bad. But if you focus strictly on the second half of the season, that equation starts to shift. I did the same analysis, but instead of looking at running backs who played 8 games across the entire season, I looked at running backs who played 5 games during the second half of their season or past week 8. I then categorized those players as rookies and non-rookies. All of a sudden, everything looks a whole lot better for the rookie running backs. Not only do rookie running backs during the second half of the season have better ceiling outcomes, but they have better floor outcomes too. Across the board, the rookies exceeded expectation by 2 and 4 PPR points per game at a better rate than the alternatives. And the veterans are underperforming at a higher rate as well, by 4 or 5 percentage points in almost every bucket. Now, this is counterintuitive because we've been taught for years that running backs are able to perform right away in the NFL. You can just drop them in an offense and they'll be fine. Wide receiver needs a little bit more time. Now, this is all still true. But my guess is that teams are still just hesitant to make these rookie running backs bell cows right away, even if they're capable. And so as the season goes on, they not only get experience, but other injuries might occur to that backfield to allow them to get a bigger workload. Because remember, generally speaking, there's only one running back on the field at once. At wide receiver, a rookie can probably find the field and run routes. And if he's good enough, he's going to earn targets. But it's funny because I don't think there's a better example with this than last season. In 2025, Ashton Genty was a little bit better in fantasy football during the second half of last year. Travion Henderson was better. RJ Harvey was better. Like we saw this really come to be with 3 of the top rookie running backs from last year, all for one reason or another. And I think this is the consideration that you have to make when you're drafting your teams, whether it's a managed league or whether it's best ball. You have to understand that historically, we do see rookie running backs providing us a scary floor. But we're taking that on in our drafts, knowing that a ceiling might eventually come. What that means is that a balance is really necessary. If you find yourself drafting a lot of rookies early on, that's not a horrible thing necessarily. You just really need to cover yourself later on in the draft, as the draft unfolds. And you need to cover yourself for the early part of the season. And there are backfields where you can find some of that early season production from non-early round players. But at running back, if you do go the route of a rookie, you really should have that balance top of mind. And that's something that it's my bad. I have not talked about that enough through the years. At wide receiver, like I said, they're just volatile bets, especially in recent years. Your own risk tolerance can really dictate how heavy you want to go with rookie wide receivers. And again, this is something that I should speak to more, because not every fantasy manager is okay with playing fantasy football the way that I do, which is really searching for those ceiling outcomes. Now look, some of this is pretty intuitive, but it's nice when data can guide us in these intuitive directions. There's comfort in that. And what the data says is that anyone who claims that rookies in redraft are terrible bets, that just hasn't been the case yet. There's just more nuance than saying draft rookies no matter what. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribe to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. I'll be back in your ears on Wednesday on YouTube with the Late Round Fantasy Football Show. And then later this week, we've got another episode of Late Round Perspectives. I'll talk to you guys then.
Wasabi is purpose-built to free your business from skyrocketing storage costs and fees. Wasabi is the go-to provider for professional and collegiate sports teams around the world. Check out Wasabi's AI-enabled intelligent media storage, Wasabi Air, to the industry's only cloud storage service with triple protection against cyber criminals. Wasabi, driving innovation in data storage for up to 80% less than market competition. Try for free at wasabi.com. Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage, proud partner of the iHeart Podcast Network.
I'm Daniel Jeremiah.
And I am Greg Rosenthal.
I know that, Greg. We're teaming up on 40s and Free Agents, the podcast that owns the NFL offseason.
This is where teams are built. Free agency, the combine, pro days, trades. Every move matters.
From my draft boards and mock drafts
to my vaunted top 101 free agents and how rosters come together.
Quarterback movement,
surprise signings.
We'll tell you what it means and who really wins. Open your free iHeart Radio app, search 40s and Free Agents, and listen now.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.